to us from on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where we try to dig deeper than the corporate media dares to or would care to. Anyway, what I want to discuss today is the future. And I don't mean the future like tomorrow or next year, but I mean the future of humanity. And more specifically, I'm going to talk about one of the elements of transhumanism, and that is robotics. Now, of course, with transhumanism, we think of biotechnology, we think of nanotechnology, but there's also the element of artificial intelligence and robotics that is one of the three sciences, I'd call it the triad of the future, in which things are really going to change for humanity, and I mean big time, okay? A bigger change than introducing a Stone Age people to the space age. And before I begin, I would encourage people, if you're listening to this later on YouTube, please click on the link to my official website there in the corner. You'll see a link. Or also, please become a subscriber so you keep up on new shows in the future. And if you get a chance to, check out my new book. And that's called, you can just do a search on Amazon. That's called The Destiny of Our Past. Or you can just type in Destiny of Our Past and you'll get to it. And let's just start by talking about the premise there as it leads into this whole discussion of what our future is, or what I'm going to call the 6 stages of robotics. Okay, I've broken it down to what I consider the 6 stages of robotics, which, this is my own creation. There's stuff out there with different types of stages, but this is mine. So anyway, in my book, The Destiny of Our Past, it's set during the era of Noah, the Atlantean period, and it's like 12,000 years ago. And without giving away too much about the book, it doesn't deal with robotics. It does deal with transhumanism in regards to biotechnology and what would happen to a society in which you could live forever. Well, maybe not forever, but at least centuries. And what that would be like. And instead of going the robot route, it goes the the biological route. You can create slaves out of recombinant DNA. You can put, you can do with DNA what you wish, because ultimately DNA is nothing more than a blueprint. Okay, you can mix and match, and of course there's disastrous results, disturbing results, and so forth. But hey, that's enough of my book there. Check it out if you want more information, The Destiny of Our Past. Now, if you study history or anthropology or both, the thing that you're left with is how the Industrial Revolution, when we started specializing in making things instead of just being able to do everything for ourselves. We grow our own food, we make our own furniture, we build our own houses. The Industrial Revolution changed that. And along with this whole specialization of labor, in which people would work in factories instead of on the land, you had the destruction of the extended family. Now, the extended family, where everyone who's genetically related pretty much lives within walking proximity of each other and often within the same house, the extended family was probably the rule for thousands of years in our history. It gave us a certain identity. It kept our traditions alive. It kept the culture going because everyone worked together of all ages, grandma, grandpa, various children of that union originally, and then their children. So you had this sense of community that was based on kinship or blood. The Industrial Revolution changed that because all of a sudden people left their villages. They left this kind of, this system in which they found comfort in, and went into the cities. And, they even changed our DNA, because usually if you lived in a village, you were pretty isolated within your DNA as well. So you wound up getting, married to people that you were at least part of the same clan. But when people moved to the cities, you had people just in England, you would have hundreds maybe of different clans of people. The Scottish still keep this kind of alive, at least in tradition. But this meant a whole bunch more than just the color of your kilt. It meant that when people left that, they started mixing, and it changed everything in regards to the composite DNA of the country. And then, as we see with globalization, we're seeing that change not just within a country, but between not beyond region, but the whole world. I mean, it's very easy for someone from Indiana in the United States to meet someone from Spain or from Russia or any other number of countries and get married and mix those traditions. And this would have been impossible without the Industrial Revolution. But I think that the robotic revolution is going to be much bigger than that, much bigger. So, in a way, these TV shows that have been on, there's one that's still on, there was one on in the past, really give us a somewhat of a preview into the future. And one of them that's really popular right now is Westworld. I would encourage people actually to watch that. It's a really well-made show. And the old series from both the 1970s and then, a few years ago, it was put back on, and that was Battlestar Galactica. And along with it, the prequel series, Caprica. These give us somewhat of an idea that robots are the future, and they really are, okay? And if we continue to advance in real life the way we are with robots now, if things just keep getting more and more and more specialized and advanced, what's it going to entail? And then we start getting questions. If robots do all the work, what do we do with the excess people? In the past, your populations could grow, and that just meant more consumers, which meant there was more job opportunities, which created the dynamism that we see today. Small populations didn't have that same dynamism. Big populations that could come together and create really good infrastructure and had good economic systems could reach to the stars. And they did. Look at the United States. Now, the thing is, we're going to have a lot of questions that we have not answered yet. I was talking to a guy that was in a seminar for, I won't mention the name of the company. It's one of the big transnational corporations in the world. You would recognize it if I mentioned it. And he said he went to this seminar because he was invited to speak, and he listened to the other speakers, and all they talked about was how robots were going to change the economy and the culture of the future. That was the topic. So big corporations and economists, they all know this is coming. Nobel Prize type scientists, they know it's coming. Joe on the street, depends on how informed he is. If you're informed, you know it's coming. If you're uninformed, you're going to be in for some big surprises. So let's just go through this from stage 1 to stage 6. And then I'm going to come back to some of these other technologies I just mentioned, the nanotechnology and the biotechnology, and how that's going to fit into this future evolution of the human species. Okay, so right now we're in stage 1 of robotics. We think we're so advanced now, but we're not. The same is true with nanotech and biotech. We're in stage 1. We're in the infancy of where we will eventually, come to. Our robots are really basic, okay? They've not really advanced so much since the 1980s in regards to factory work. I mean, most of our robots today, They're like the extended arm that comes up and moves an item from point A to point B. Maybe they screw in an item or attach it to complete point C. But essentially, they're labor-saving devices where you still need people there, but they may do a lot of the stuff that it might have taken 3 men in the past to lift up a big metallic object and put it somewhere. The robot can do that and save you having to have those 3 men working. And so really, we're kind of in that stage where if you think of Terminator 1 towards the end, when the Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's in that steel factory and he sees one of these mechanical arms doing something, and he sort of has this funny look as he's looking at it. You know, you get this idea. He's like looking at his primordial existence, you know, where he came from. And that's still where we're at. Now, what has advanced is our artificial intelligence. But to get to stage 2, we will have to combine at least rudimentary thinking, which means a little bit more artificial intelligence research, to mobility. And, of course, that's going to require flexibility and some sort of sustainable mobile energy source. You know, you see some of these robots that DARPA's working on, and they pretty much look like big toasters with legs. And I'm sure they've got stuff much more advanced than that, much more that we don't know about. But that's what they're showing us. And they don't look so impressive. They look like a dog with no head, and but made out of metal, and it carries things. But often they have like a big energy pack on, or if they're in a building, they're attached to a cable. That's very limiting. So you're going to have to work on that energy source, which they are working on. And when it comes to human application, like you and me type application, aside from our computers and being able to ask directions in a GPS and maybe give us a very, very basic answer, pretty much the human application is very low. Okay, there's people talking about sex robots, but if you take a look at much of the stuff that's out there that people are saying, oh, we're selling these next year, they're basically dolls that feel and look human. They might have something that makes the lips move or the eyes blink or something, but that's all they are. Okay, we've not reached that stage where you're going to have, sit there at the table and talk to your robot. Okay, we're just not there yet. But one thing that these have caused, though, all these robots and better computer systems and so forth has caused, is that many blue-collar labor jobs are gone. And unfortunately, they won't return. Of course, our politicians promised, with globalization and mechanization and automation, there will be different types of jobs. But it hasn't materialized. We haven't had that transition from horse to car, which meant that there was jobs in the auto plants. Instead of being a blacksmith, you could work on the assembly line. We have not seen that. Okay, and I don't really foresee that blue collar jobs as we think of back in the Fred Flintstone days, when everyone went off to work with their lunch pails. And that was maybe 30% of your population doing that. I don't think that's going to come back. We may have some return if the economy gets better, but we're not going to see a major shift back to the 1950s in that regards. Stage 2. Now, when we reach stage 2, which we're coming close to, that's when you're going to see more of these plastic-looking robots of the science fiction variety doing manual tasks. Okay, it's not going to just be the arm lifting something and putting it somewhere, but it'll be something that maybe looks a little bit human and picks up something very heavy and moves it somewhere else. Now, again, like I said, these would require the ability not just to react, but also to think. For instance, if it's hit with an unusual situation. That's where the artificial intelligence would have to come in. So you have to have an effective worker. To have an effective worker, you do not want it to stop doing a task if a box falls in front of it, and it just stops. Like, when those toys that you play with when you were a kid, and maybe a toy train that would run on the floor, and then if it came to the wall, it turns around and goes another way. You got to have something more than that. It has to have the ability to process options. It has to be able to think. Do I pick it up, go around, evaluate damage to the contents? These are the things that a regular worker would be able to do. The robot has to do that if you're going to start replacing pretty much all jobs with robots. And, of course, with competition and the economy, you'll see a desire, especially in countries like China that still have a lot of labor-intensive industry. They're going to really, really strive to get better and better quality robots that will replace people. And hey, robots don't have a problem when it comes to having to sleep, having menstrual cramps, getting sick, spraining an ankle. Of course, they can get damaged, I'm sure. But the thing is, you can see my point. They may cost a lot at first, but they're going to be very cost efficient afterwards. They don't have babies. They don't ask for time off to be at home with a child. They just work. Okay? Now, the EU is talking about giving them human rights. But I'm kind of going, wait a minute. I mean, unless you guys know something that the rest of us don't know, robots are not at that stage of thinking in the sense of, who am I? Where do I fit into the universe? But then again, maybe the EU, people that run the EU know a little bit more than we do. Anyway, now, at this point, your computer also, which you're interacting with, may be able to speak to you if artificial intelligence continues to expand. And I'm not talking about, again, the stuff where you ask a question and the computer tries to assess what you've said and then gives you this answer, like we have in cars nowadays, that a lot of people have this. I think it would be more like the old computers in the old Star Trek series, where you can actually maybe have somewhat of a conversation with the computer, and they'll be able to problem solve with you. That's going to be here soon. And here is when we could see the application as companions, care workers, sex robots, because we will be able to get responses that are not necessarily just programmed replies. Now, of course, at this point, we will see most labor jobs and some service jobs cease to be human dependent. At this point, when you can interact at least at a very rudimentary level, then there's no reason for the busboy at the restaurant to be a boy or a man or a woman or whatever. It can be a mechanical device that will come to your table, clear your table, and go back and probably just hand over the stuff to another robot. Okay? So at this point, we're going to see a lot of the jobs that maybe people went into when they lost their job at the steel factory because it was automated. They'll see the job maybe they had to take at a restaurant in replacement, which of course didn't pay very much, being taken over by a robot as well, and so forth. So there's where we're going to see a lot of changes. And of course, that's going to put a lot of people out of work. I'll get to this whole work thing though, because I have a theory as to what they're going to do to solve this problem. Okay, and we'll just get there. Okay. Now, stage 3. Here is when you're going to see such things as military applications really come in. Hello, Battlestar Galactica. Aircraft no longer need to have pilots. Drones will carry out their own missions. All right? You will have drones that will be programmed so they can think and analyze a situation, assess it, and kill a target if that's what they feel is the necessary thing to do. And you won't need someone aside from maybe someone to review things just like you do now with drone operators. This is where people start getting a little worried. This is where we're starting to talk about the robot apocalypse type thing. But let's just pretend like we don't have to worry. We can keep them under our control. Now, active duty personnel, this will be when they'll start getting phased out. Because service personnel, which usually take up the largest percentage of your military, will be all robotic. And when it comes to frontline type stuff, your tanks, they could be automated so that you don't need actual people in those tanks. The pretty much all of our really technological devices could be instead just taken over by artificial intelligence devices that will do the trick. Now, you may still need human beings, but then I think in the next stage, you won't so much need even human beings to go door to door if you're like fighting in another country or to be on the front lines. It'll all be robot. Now, at this point, almost all service jobs are gone. Small entrepreneurs, where you have to sell things that are, creative. People like nurses and artists and so forth will still exist. Notice I didn't say doctors. Doctors just assess what the problem is. And by this time, I think you won't need human doctors. They will, assessment can easily take place a variety of ways, but it will not need a human doctor. It'll all be calculated out. And then you will still have someone that'll hold your hand when you get out of an operation. But again, very emotionally based care type things. They'll still be there, but most of your other jobs are gone. Most lower level business jobs no longer outsourced. Okay, so you're not going to worry about your job being sent to Bangladesh. You're going to be worried about your job just being given to a robot. Now, the robots will be more efficient in whatever task they're given. And at this point, if you decide, well, I'll be a sex worker, most of your sex workers will be robots by this point, because they will look and appear human. They may be a little slow and sluggish, the ones that are out there on the public, but I think the ones the rich people will have, they'll be almost indistinguishable from real human beings. Okay? Because instead of the hydraulics and so forth, it'll be synthetic. Again, similar to like what you see on Westworld. You'll have flexibility. It won't be like you're holding a toaster's hand. It will be like you're holding a real person's hand. Okay? Now, this gets us into Hello Westworld, Stage 4. As advances in robotics allow for more, complete flexibility of all movement, and synthetic material and organic can be connectable. You know what I mean? You lose your hand. Well, we need to put another hand on there. But instead of, let's say your hand gets ground up in something. There's no way you can sew it back on. You put an artificial hand on, and then all the nerves are able to grasp onto and connect and rewire to where that hand, even though it's synthetic, will be just like a human hand. Okay, we're working on something. I've seen some stuff I didn't believe when I first heard that you can put a chip in someone's arm and it starts getting integrated within the human person's arm. Well, that we're still at kind of an infancy stage there. When we hit stage 4, that's when things really start changing. Now we're entering the era of cybernetics. Here's where we can replace our bodies. In fact, maybe only have your brain and spinal cord placed into a superior body. And you may think that's, whoa, would I want that? Well, let's say you're 85 years old, you don't get around so well. Now, of course, this is, ignoring nanotech, which could change that. But let's just say you're not getting around so well anymore. You're 85 years old. But you can go in and have your brain removed and put into a 20-year-old version of you. You still have all your memories. You are who you are. You could feel stuff. You might, who knows, probably need a little time to connect all the wires, your organic nerves and the synthetic nerve endings. so that everything works and feels like your old body did. But it'll happen. And maybe your new body is even better than the old one. Maybe you can run, 40 miles per hour. Maybe you don't have to be out of breath or anything. You're just very functional. Just, recharge your batteries, however they'll do it in those days. But a lot of people will not just do this because of, see, when we hit this stage, you may see people start thinking, well, why not just actually do this because it's better? Okay, and then, that's what I mean, cybernetics. And, but I'll come back to that in just a moment. All of our jobs at this point are replaced. We've reached the stage that computers are self-aware, and there's no need for humans to even invent anything anymore. In fact, some people call this a singularity point, where the computer is so many thousands or millions times smarter than we are to put everything together. And so maybe you go in and say, how do I develop a hand that can attach to a body that will work perfectly as a hand? The computer comes up with a process. Maybe, and this gets into the biotechnology, and this is not out of the realm of possibilities. This is one thing I deal with in my book, The Destiny of Our Past. And that is the idea that once you have a computer system that can interpret exactly what gene would link with what gene to cause what characteristic, and that you can create any species, you could create a centaur. Okay, you really could. You have to know how everything would line up so it turns out that you get a living, functional centaur. But at this point, no one has to do it themselves anymore. Humans are unneeded for that. Now, at this point, too, most people are involved with sex robots. Relationships are so 20th and maybe early 21st century. In fact, at this point, a man wouldn't need a woman because he could just have a child, and he could get a donation of an egg, and then he could just raise that in an artificial womb and have a robot co-parent, sort of what we saw kind of in Terminator 2, where John starts to see the Arnold, the Schwarzenegger robot character, as a father. We could see that happening, and vice versa. A woman, just needs a sperm. She doesn't really need a man if she doesn't want to. Now, there is something quite interesting about this, and that is what will happen to the family by the time we reach this point. Now, I should note, too, at this time, a human brain may not only be able to be placed in a synthetic body, but attachments could be inserted into the brain to allow a person to be as efficient and intelligent as a computer, but still retain their own ego. Of course, by this time, the opposite could also be true, where people could have their individual egos erased as they merge into the machine, essentially becoming extensions of the computer. I talked to a young woman the other day about this kind of concept, and she said she would so love to have that option to do. I'm like, excuse me, wouldn't that mean you would die? But she said, yeah, but my body would still be there, and I'd be an extension of the machine, and so everything would be perfect. I said, yeah, but you would cease to exist. And she's like, yeah, whatever. What is the ego anyway? And I'm like, whoa. But then she said a lot of people that she knows that would probably go for it too. This kind of nirvana of emptiness, that and so forth. But then again, you could also have a situation in which people would, they might just try to micromanage it just a little bit here, a little bit there, or they could go all the way. But the thing is, at this point, your brain will no longer just be the brain. It's going to have attachments, just like maybe you have your legs removed so you could put on some better legs that work 10 times better, but look actually absolutely identical to the legs that you originally had, or much better. Who knows? Now this gets us to stage 5.
Now, I would think that by the time you hit stage 5, perhaps you'd only have a small population of authentic humans existing on the Earth. By this time, Earth is pretty much no longer human-based the way we think of it today with our population of around 7 billion. And at this point, you would probably see planning take place where most cities that we know of today would be deconstructed and returned to nature. And when I say a small number of authentic people, probably the elite. Probably the very elite. Because earlier, and I'm going to talk about this here, just hold on here, I'm going to talk about it. Earlier, people would have been phased out, no longer needed. And this is, you could get down to maybe a population, maybe the population grows for the next few decades, gets up to maybe 9 billion. But then it could be within 100 years down to maybe a third of that. In another 100 years down to a third of that. Or even quicker. Who knows? But I have my reasons for this happening. But then you would maybe even see entire continents that would be labeled as wildlife preserves. Now, stage 6, this is possibly human extinction. I have read a lot of stuff that scientists have said in the recent couple of years, saying if we get in contact with other worlds, make contact with other planets, it may be that it will not be with organic organisms. It will be, if we reach another planet's civilization, that they would have already gone through this period and become, synthetic. That by this point, maybe even having the brain of whatever we would call human at this time would be seen as burdensome. And so your robot descendants would meet up with robots from another world, and so on and so forth. And I don't know, to me that sounds rather dismal. It is one direction we could take, but it is a possible direction. I still think, though, that we would still have people, even if it was just the elite, and a small professional class to take care of them, that there would still be humanity. And I really do believe that will continue on indefinitely in that sense. But you could wind up with a complete overhaul of things. Now, let me explain, though, what I think could lead to the things I've talked to. Now, we have not yet really come to the point where we can grapple with replacing our jobs between stages 1 and 2. Okay, now there are ideas. Some people have suggested a guaranteed income. And that people would, then they still go out and buy things. So basically the companies, they make stuff, they have to pay taxes on it. And then those taxes go back to guaranteed incomes, and then people buy the products from the companies. Karl Marx talked about this idea that the utopia would eventually arrive where machines do all the work for us. I don't think he envisioned this, but he did talk about machines taking over, and so no one had to go out there and work and sweat and, put their lives in danger building things and so forth. So this guaranteed income would be the solution. Now you're probably thinking, okay, well, what's everyone going to do? Well, here's something. You take a look. You should look up United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Now, a lot of the stuff that's coming out of the UN and various think tanks is an idea of creating population centers where almost all humans live in urban areas. They're small urban, what would you call it? You would have small apartments. And with those small apartments, if you throw in this whole idea of a guaranteed income, my speculation is that it would be enough income to perhaps, be comfortable, maybe a little bit bigger than a college dorm or something. But, I'm thinking this. During the Soviet era, the Kremlin promoted childbirth. They even gave medals to women, Mother of the Revolution Award if they had 10 kids. But urban dwellers generally only had one kid, even with all the propaganda about how wonderful having 3 kids would be, due to the small living accommodations. So my guess would be, first of all, that there might be enough room in one of these apartments for maybe one kid. And if you're guaranteed income, you take a look at it. It doesn't grow when you have 2 kids and 3 kids and 4 kids, but stays constant. So you would have I think you would have some government agencies sitting there going, oh, well, let's see, here's how much money one person can live on comfortably. Here's how much 2 people could live on comfortably, and no more. Now you're probably thinking, yeah, but that's just the husband and wife. I think that husbands and wives will, just like the extended family, you saw an end to grandma and grandpa living in the same house. I think you're going to see an end to, at least this is what's in the works. Okay, I'm not saying this is something I like, and I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but this is what's in the works. This is what the elite would like to do. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a more female-oriented population until you reach the final stages where, we start seeing everything being synthetic. Women are the ones who have the children. Now, as sex robots advance, many men will see marriage as just, inconvenient, unnecessary. The cost-benefit will weigh heavily to remaining single. Likely, and this is my opinion, likely eugenics will be phased in as women seek donors for their one child. Because they're going to still maybe want to have a kid, and they're going to want to make sure that one kid is perfect. Now, there you could throw in some biotechnology too, where conception will only take place in the lab. A woman could remain a virgin all of her life, never have sex with a man if she didn't want to. I mean, they can do that today, but I think it's going to become more prevalent in the future. And they might become, in this kind of atmosphere, women may also become far more fluid in their sexuality, which, this could result in maybe forming relationships with other women, and maybe if they want, 1 or 2 men can be part of the network as well. Now, this is already starting to kind of sprout, and it's called omnigamy. And this is like setting up a chart, a corporate chart, where maybe this person, they're all connected, but they're living their individual lives, but as long as they're part of the network, they kind of have the benefits, of being married. So within a network, again, I'm just saying what could be a possibility, because this is what some polyamorous families look like today. They don't necessarily live with each other, but maybe Joe and Pedro, they like to get together sometimes and romp in bed, and spend time together and do all this kind of stuff. And Susie and Clara like to do the same thing. But sometimes Susie likes to be with John, and then maybe Hank over here, and then maybe you have a situation where Marcia and Maria, and you see what I'm saying? This is kind of a situation that wouldn't exist in an agrarian society. It would be very inefficient, even if someone was inclined to want such a thing. This is something that only usually comes in amongst the upper levels of society, where you have, most of your swingers. You got to remember, America, let's just say America, it is a place where you're not worried about the next meal on your table, okay? So in some ways, it is living the life of maybe the elite of 200 years ago. But, you see swingers, they usually occur amongst the upper class. You may see, like on a Jerry Springer show, you may see, some people that live in trailers or something like that. But ultimately, most from my understanding and my research, most of your swingers come from professional. They're usually younger, middle age. They're not the kind of people that you would see on a talk show necessarily. But the thing is that this is a product of a change in economy. Now, of course, you're saying, yeah, but looser morals. But sometimes looser morals come from urbanization, communication, and a change in economy. Okay? We have people nowadays who they're thinking, okay, well, I want to be a doctor. Okay, well, that means you're going to be like 27 before you graduate. Then they're thinking to themselves, okay, well, if you come from a very religious background that says, oh, I have to be a virgin until I'm 27 because that's when I'm going to look around and see about getting married, because a lot of people don't want to be married in college. So therefore, longer colleges, delayed marriage and childbirth usually leads to people having far more sexual partners during their life, as opposed to if they lived in an agrarian society where maybe the first person they ever meet and fall in love with, that's the person that they're connected to forever. Now, this society that I described could easily wind up polyamorous, female-dominated, and very technological. Okay, you don't need that many men. Maybe just a few men, and that again would not be because you needed them for family or companionship. Your companionship will be with who you're with. Okay, and so I would see that this society that we'd be getting into in when you get past stage 2 and you get past even stage 3 would look like this. Now, religions that rely heavily on traditional views of marriage and family, I would see that their very core people would remain faithful, okay? But they'd see themselves as being more and more different than society. They would, who knows, maybe they would be the ones who, when you reach stage 5 or 6, it's the elite, and it's small numbers of these people who are the final humans left on Earth. You never know. But anyway, the religions that are heavy on traditional values of marriage and family would probably lose most of their significance in these eras. And, the thing is, though, humans, I think, are spiritual creatures. So more time may lead to more contemplation of spiritual ideals, thus lending to a form of 1960s transcendence culture. Okay, you may get kind of not atheism. I think actually you get opposite. The more we know, the more we might realize that atheism does not explain it. Cold evolution does not explain who we are. But then we start thinking. We have lots of time on our hands to contemplate these things. The hippies in the 60s still had to work to get some money to eat. These people wouldn't have to work. So therefore they have all the time in the world. And they have instant communication with anyone on Earth or anything. And they have robots that even they can communicate with and discuss things with. So I think we would hit a really interesting level of spirituality, so to speak. Now, the people who rely on their hands, we got to say this, the people who have traditionally had to rely on their hands for work may not have a place in this new world order. They will not be eliminated. I think we're past that. But the only thing you really will need to do, I think we're already starting this in stage 1, but definitely from stage 2 on, you have to get them to stop reproducing. Okay? You have to get them focused on other things. I don't know. You can get them focused on consumerism. You can constantly, through their media, make it look like, oh, family, that's not so big a deal. You distract them. And the way you see birth rates plummeting in countries that they went from working class to affluent. Very quickly, you see their birth rates plummet the fastest. Countries such as Japan and Italy and Spain, barely any kids being born. So this is something that can be applied worldwide. And I think social planners know this for a fact, and it's not that difficult to really reduce birth rates under these circumstances, especially from stages 2 on. And then what you have to do is probably get the middle management classes as well. So as we don't need any of these people to do work anymore, then we figure that we just, again, distract people. Make the norm that one kid. You don't do it like, there's been some countries that have tried doing it very with draconian measures, and they're successful. But then there's other countries, like I said, Italy doesn't have any kind of thing. In fact, Italy encourages people to have kids, but yet you only get one per woman. So I don't think it would be too far-fetched to believe that you could reduce it even more to where maybe only one woman out of 4 wants to have a baby. And you just go on and on and on like this. Again, you can, even without this whole minimum guaranteed income to replace work, I think you could still do this anyway. But if you throw that minimum income in and you control it in such a way that you make it difficult for someone to want to have more than one kid, then that's going to make it even more effective. Again, I think what you're going to have in these cases is you're going to have an elite. You're going to have a group of professionals they rely on. People like, because I think they would still want to have people like doctors and so forth. But, there will be professionals, the technicians, unless robots can replace them too. But, again, it's going to be a very small percentage of the population that would basically survive this. Again, there's a parallel there to my science fiction book. But, again, this may not happen. But I don't see anything that's really going to stand in the way of this automated future, unless there's some sort of economic catastrophe that would delay it, but not eliminate it. Some sort of war, which, of course, if you have to rebuild civilization, but eventually we would reach the robot stage again. So these are things we have to grapple with, and you got to decide: would you want you and your descendants to be part of the masses? They'll just be like, oh, look, the trinkets, and then you just get phased out. Would you want to be one of the ones who's like the holdover, that it refuses to be phased out? Again, I think that would be a small percentage, really, of the population, but it would be people that would do this. And then you would have the elite, who would have all the benefits of this technology but still not be phased out from it. And this is just something we do have to grapple with, because it's not going away, and it's just coming at us. It's it's almost like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. You may think, oh, look, that's a long ways away down there. That's 37,000 feet. I have nothing to worry about. But it's going to catch up to you. And these are issues that I think are going to be quite fascinating. And, we should try to keep our ethics alive and well, and keep an eye on these people that want to modify, well, not just the world, but us. Anyway, I was going to mention 2 ways or 2 questions that you can ask to determine if someone is a narcissist. Now, these have been all over, the internet and stuff, but really, I think there's some validity to them because I've known people who score very high on the narcissist test, and it seems that they answer the way that one would expect if these theories that have been going on out there are actually correct. That you could check someone with just 2 simple questions. Before I get into that, though, I mean, the term narcissism's been thrown around a lot when it comes to Barack Obama, when it comes to Donald Trump. I've also heard terms thrown around about psychopathy. And, you know, if I was going to make a determination, I would say Obama and Trump are probably pretty hardcore narcissists. Psychopathy, though? Nah. It requires a little bit more, how should I say, commitment to the personality disorder. And to be honest, I think actually, and I'm going to go into this later in a show, I think Obama and Trump both care about what people think, whereas a psychopath doesn't. Okay? There are aspects of psychopathy and narcissism that are the same, which leads me to believe that it's not a sociological thing. It's not parenting skills, nor is it watching children's TV when you're young and, you know, starting to get into this kind of wannabe narcissist thing and dressing all the glitzy clothes and stuff like that Hollywood teaches you need to buy and, you know, be obsessed with yourself. A true narcissist is much stronger in character than a wannabe narcissist. Wannabe narcissists are what the narcissist and the psychopath feed on. The 2 questions are this. One is, just ask someone, are you a narcissist? You know, and you may think that just is a little atrocious. You know, I mean, no one's going to admit to it. But from my understanding and reading various articles, it seems that a narcissist is very quick to say, yeah, I am. They admit to it. Now, of course, that's not diagnosis. You would have to actually maybe administer a test to them. And then if they come up high there, then, of course, again, that's not diagnosis unless if you're a psychologist or a psychiatrist and can actually give more detailed questions to find out whether someone's just, you know, trying to answer so it looks cool or something. That's the problem with all these tests on the internet. The other question that I have heard is, what is it that you would change about your personality to make yourself a better person? Don't mistake this for what would you change about yourself in regards to such things as your appearance. Even a hardcore narcissist who maybe lost his hair might say, well, I'd like to have my hair back. If you put it into the category of personality itself and ask a narcissist what they would change, they'll look at you like, I don't know, you just asked someone out in the jungles of Brazil to explain quantum physics. They'll just go like, what? What are you talking about? And so ultimately, those are the 2 questions you could ask. Now, the interesting thing is, again, I think that there is a genetic component. The traits overlap quite a bit with psychopathy, although, again, I've mentioned that they actually care what people think about them. There is a persona that they don't want ruined. But things like empathy, they have very low empathy for other people. All right? If you've got, get this, let's say you've got that coach, you know, that coach in high school that sort of looked like Johnny Bravo out there, you know, strutting out there, and during pep assemblies, they made sure they hogged up all the attention. Now, those were often the kind of coaches that if you went out and said, oh, I'm not feeling good, I got a tummy ache, I can't go running. And they're like saying, no, you get out there and run, you know, you do it. I did it yesterday, you do it. And you're like, but have sympathy. No, they won't have a lot of sympathy for you. They'll look at someone who's overweight and they're just kind of like, your fault, you get out there and change it. Now, maybe that's a good thing, but they will not look at this as being something that they'll actually think, well, I can kind of understand why you may have a weight problem. I can relate to it. But now maybe here's some solutions. No, the narcissist won't relate at all in that respect. Also, a narcissist is likely that if you've planned a really good fishing trip on that Saturday, and you call and you tell him or her that you're sick and you can't go, they'll be like, hey, come on, you can go, don't worry. You know, they'll push you to go, and even if it might mean you get pneumonia. And if you don't go, they'll see you as weak. They won't think, oh, yeah, I understand. I'm disappointed, but, I understand. They don't have a lot of feelings of guilt, just like the psychopath. They tend to be risk takers because they have a grandiose sense of themselves. They can do no wrong. They can't lose. And if they do lose, it's always someone else's fault. And these are traits that are highly associated, like I said, with psychopathy. And I'm not going to say, I almost said sociopathy. I don't like using that word because I really think that it's the same thing. And the whole thing in the DSM about the antisocial personality disorder thing, I think is ultimately too behavioristic and also says, oh, well, we need to have these things displayed versus saying this person has a personality that makes it hard for them to function in certain areas. Of course, it makes it easy to function in other areas. If you're a movie star, oh, come on, look at these award ceremonies for Hollywood. I mean, you got narcissists. Oh, you're so wonderful. No, you're wonderful. No, you're wonderful. Oh, we're so wonderful. And people tune in to watch that? Seriously? My gosh, I mean, tune out and watch something that's more wholesome than these kinds of shows. But ultimately, too, the idea is that you could say that there's a certain self-centeredness about wannabe narcissist and true narcissist. But the true narcissist will look at life much differently than the wannabe. The wannabe is just an insecure person. The narcissist is a highly secure person. And therefore, when they go out to accomplish something, they're entitled to it. They're going to go for it. If there's a gal that they want to have, or there's a guy that they want to have, or if there's a political office they want to have, they'll zero in on it. Now again, psychopaths are the same way. But the narcissist at least cares about what people think. The problem is, as opposed to the psychopath, is that they care what other people think of them. So their feelings can get hurt and bruised, and their egos can really take a beating, whereas a psychopath sort of like, yeah, whatever, this is what we're going to do. And they go through it just straight through, like a surgeon cutting through tissue to fix a problem. The narcissist, on the other hand, gets really upset, and things can happen that are not necessarily good in that respect. Then again, in relationships, the narcissist is usually a little bit easier to control as opposed to the psychopath. But then again, well, we'll go into this in much more detail maybe next week. Anyway, so I'm not saying go out and try this on everyone, the questions, but it's something to consider. Maybe even asking yourself. But anyway, that's just a little, segment on how to identify the narcissist in your life. I hope you can tune in again next week for another edition of Unlock the Door Radio.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.